people are like, oh, you got to go to these conferences. It must be such a drain to be on the road. I'm like, are you kidding me? To go from really one party to the next where all your friends are and you haven't seen them in a while and in different cities and you get paid to do it, basically? I mean, what more could you ask for?
In law school, attorneys are taught to challenge everything, tear things apart, break them down, but the qualities that make lawyers great are some of the worst for running a business. At every stage of growth, running a business and practicing law can feel overwhelming. And what happens when you try to add life and family to the mix? It can feel nearly impossible. You don't have to do this alone. I'm Maria Monroy, president and co-founder of LawRank, a leading SEO agency for ambitious law firms. Each week, we hear from the industry leaders on what it really takes to run a law firm, from marketing to manifestation. Because success lies in the balance of life and law, we're here to help you tip the scales. Today, I'm live with Dan Ambrose from Trial Lawyers University, and today we spoke about his upcoming conferences. Dan, Ambrose.
Maria.
I'm so excited to have you finally come on the podcast.
Well, I can't tell you how excited I am to be here.
All right. I think a lot of people associate you with TLU, previously Trojan Horse, but I don't know that everyone knows like your background. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I'm the youngest of 8 kids.
Are you really?
Mm-hmm.
Seriously?
Yeah, I wouldn't make that up. 6 kids now because 2 of my brothers passed away in 2022. So
I'm sorry.
That's what happens as you get older. People pass, but it's life. I went to all boys Catholic schools my entire life.
That explains
until I got to go to the University of Michigan. I worked as a house painter from the ages of about 12 to age 32. When I was 16, I quit working for my brother and started my own house painting business. And I did it all the way through law school. And even after I became a lawyer, I still was a contractor instead of being a lawyer for about the first 4 years of it. What else can I tell you about it? I was a criminal defense lawyer for about 17 years until I moved to California when I was 45 years old.
How old are you now?
55.
Okay. Just to give people context.
Yeah. So I just did nothing but criminal defense, but I was roommates with Nick Rowley at the Trial Lawyers College, and he encouraged me to come out to Las Vegas right here to watch him present for CALA. And when I did, I saw a whole new world that I didn't know existed called the plaintiff's world. And it looked very attractive to me, being in warm weather and with people that they appeared to make a lot of money. And so I thought, this looks like a better life than the one I have in Michigan. And so as they said in the famous TV show, I loaded up the car and I moved to Beverly
Did you
Hills,
really?
that is. No, well, yeah, kind of. I was just couch surfing, but it was in Beverly Hills.
Whose couch?
It was in a small apartment that was rented by an individual named Jose, who was Nick Rowley's personal assistant.
Oh my God, this is hilarious. And then what happened?
Well, then I eventually got my own place after about a year when I decided I was going to stay here and I needed to be more stable because I was going back and forth the first year a lot, finishing up cases there, helping my former partner, help her develop her business. And then after about a year, I got an apartment in West Hollywood and, started the new phase of my life in a more stable way with an actual address.
Got it. Did you ever practice PI or what happened? Because I only know you as like what you do now, right? But
Right.
Between now and then, what were you doing?
Well, I had to take the California bar
Did you pass it the
eventually.
first time?
No. Took 4 tries, but I did pass it on the 4th try.
Congrats.
Thank you. And I anticipated practicing more, but once I really started seeing what the practice of law is like, I decided it really wasn't a good fit for me.
But weren't you practicing in Michigan?
Practicing criminal defense is very different than being a personal injury lawyer. Very different. I mean, the preparation, the discovery is basically nothing as a criminal defense lawyer. You get a police report and you get a preliminary examination. That's it. in civil world, you have so much discovery, depositions, interrogatories, request to admit, request to produce, and a lot of motion practice. So none of that really fit my my skill set. So it didn't quite develop into the plan that I had when I took the bar, when I sat for the bar and finally passed.
Right. So what did you do next?
Well, I started doing these workshops at my apartment in West Hollywood because I wanted to kind of keep my skills of presentation, but really it was to be social because I didn't know anybody there. And it's when you move to a new place when you're 45 years old, it's not like moving to a new city when you're 20 or 25.
No, not at all.
And when you don't have a regular job where you're working with people that are, that you'll have community with, you have to, if you're a social person that needs other people around you, then you have to find a way to build a community around yourself or you'll be very lonely. And that was kind of what my workshops were at my apartment. Like the funny thing is there's people that that were there in those early days, like EBA Sec used to come over. You know EBA, right?
I don't.
You don't know EBA?
I don't think so.
I thought you know her. She's pretty well known trial lawyer. You know my friend Stephen King?
I do.
Okay, so King, and he was like my first friend besides Nick Rowley when I came here. And so he'd come over and train all the time. And then, you wouldn't know the rest of the people, but it was a start. It was a start. And then in 2014, I was in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, climbing. I was in Teton, climbing the mountain with a friend of mine, Jacob Norman, who runs Trial by Human with Nick Rowley now. And I was complaining about the Trial Lawyers College and that I didn't think that it was doing a very good job of teaching trial skills. And he said to me, well, you can continue to complain and be part of the problem, or if you think you're so smart, you can start your own program and see if anybody follows you, and then you'll know if you're right or wrong. And I thought about it for a moment. I said, I'll do it. And he said, well, if you do it, it has to have a cool name. And so we started brainstorming names, and eventually we landed on Trojan Horse Method because, the kind of process had to deal with, I think if you're to be really persuasive with anybody, you have to be able to get past the superficial. You have to be able to try to access their unconscious processing. And that was kind of the idea behind it.
How do you do that?
Well, with rhetoric, the words you use, and also the things that are nonverbal, the hand gesticulation, facial expressions, eye contact and eye movement, voice control. It's the whole idea is to, that's connection, right?
Yeah.
What is connection between two people? It's when you have a connection with somebody, it's somewhat trance-like. Like you have a connection with when you're watching a TV show. If you get upset or cry, it's because you're in what I think we'd call a story trance. Because it's not real logically, yet you allow yourself to be put into this state because you want to go there. Because if you just didn't pay attention if you looked at your phone constantly while it was an emotional scene, you would not get any emotion from it because you would not be connected to the story.
Correct. And then after Trojan Horse is when you started Trial Lawyers University?
Not quite. There was a step in between. The step in between was called case analysis.
Oh, I don't know this. This is news to me.
I think the date was May 31st, 2019. We did the first live case analysis seminar in San Francisco, California, and Chris Dolan was the presenter because I'd met Chris about 6 weeks earlier at the Grand Havana Room and sat with him and visited, and he was telling me about this trial he was doing and all the interesting things that happened. And I thought, this is tremendous learning. These lessons, these stories, I think this would be a very good seminar. And I said, so if I can get a bunch of people together to sit and listen to you for a day, are you willing to come and talk about it? And the truth is there's never been a trial lawyer who doesn't want an audience and doesn't want to talk about his victory. So of course he was like, yes. And so he did. And we had about 80 or 90 people come.
Wow.
And so I was pretty stoked about it too, because my Trojan Horse programs were only like 15 people. And so this was a really great vehicle to allow me to get to know more people and to get more people in my community And so I did about 6 of those. And then the pandemic came along. I remember because we had a program scheduled for downtown LA for March 20th, I believe, 2020, and with Sean Claggett. And Sean Claggett was out there the week before, and Dan Kramer. And they were all I had a nice high-rise apartment that I just moved into March 1st. And so they all came out there because we were going to put together this, the plan of what we were going to be doing. And I remember Sean kept calling me, he's like, dude, I think you need to cancel it. There's this stuff called COVID. I'm like, that's bullshit. We're going forward. And of course, I was wrong. And so
wait, can you say that again?
I was wrong.
Okay, thank you.
There you go. And so, and so when COVID came, I had never been on a Zoom before. I'd never been on a webinar before, but somehow I got this idea to start doing these webinars. And the first one I did was just a replay of Chris Dolan's presentation that I didn't even record because I didn't know about recording them then. And I would just stop it and make maybe some comments on the presentation. I can't quite remember. But from there, I called Sean and asked him if he wanted to do a webinar. And so our initial format was taking trial videos off CVN and kind of breaking them down. Because right when COVID started, a friend of mine, Ari Moss, came over to my apartment, and we were working on some type of closing argument structure. And I had CVN on, and I can't remember who was presenting on it, but I was commenting on this trial lawyer's presentation. And Ari was like, you should, kind of maybe do like a postpartum replay, and maybe you can try to get the presenters on, and so you guys can kind of comment and critique the presentation. And that's kind of what led to the webinars during the pandemic. And I was doing, everybody thought the pandemic was going to end after a couple months, right?
Right.
And so there was this one point when they're like, okay, we're going to be opening up in 10 days, like in LA. And so I'm like, oh my God, I'm running. I was racing the clock. So I started doing two broadcasts a day.
But how were you monetizing that?
Well, as it worked out, I had 3 sponsors. I had priority responsible funding because these sponsors contacted me and they wanted to sponsor. I'm like, why do you want to sponsor? There's 50 or 75 people on here. I don't know what's going to do. And they were like, no, we just want to be involved. But that worked out really well for them because for priority, focused graphics, and strategic, this community called Trial Lawyers University, I think, has done a lot to help them grow their businesses through the pandemic and, of course, beyond.
That's amazing. I don't know if you know this, but obviously we've known each other for, I don't even know how long now, a couple of years, just from conferences. And I never really knew exactly what you did. And then I knew you had TLU, but I wasn't I don't know. I didn't think you were legit. So I just, okay, he has this thing, whatever, right? And then one day we're at a conference a couple of years ago, post-pandemic, but still during the pandemic. And I was hosting a dinner. And I invited you, and someone asked me, who else is going? And I mentioned your name, and they freaked out. They're like, oh my God, I love him. I love TLU. It's all I watched during the pandemic. And I was like, wait, you're telling me that you actually watch? And he's like, yeah, a lot of people do. And that's the moment I realized, he's actually this is the thing. I really just didn't know, you were my friend, and we had never really talked about it. And we always just kind of had a lot of banter. But that was the moment I'm never going to forget that I was like, oh, wow, he's legit. This is a really cool thing. And now how many viewers do you have?
Well, it depends on who's presenting, but somewhere between 75 to 200 every day when we have live programs.
That's amazing, though, every day.
Not every day, but I'd only do maybe 8 or 10 programs.
How many subscribers do you have?
Oh, TLU On Demand?
Yeah.
It's a hard number to say, but probably in the neighborhood of 600 or so, 650. But they're all over there's law students, some public defenders. We just are launching an app so that everything we've ever broadcast, every webinar we ever broadcast, every live event we've ever done, we recorded them all. And so in about less than a week, everything will be available on the app because we're just beta testing it, but it works really well because you just search anything you want, a speaker, a topic, hit it, and it starts playing. There's no loading time. There's no nothing.
That's amazing. Congrats.
Thanks. I'm pretty excited about it because it's really going to make the information so much easier to access for people, because people had been asking me, and I was like, whatever. But you listen, and then it wasn't as difficult. It was a little bit of work, but not as difficult as I imagined it would be.
So I'm really bummed because you're not hosting Trial Lawyers University in Vegas this year, as of now.
Yes. And I'm a little bit disappointed, but not really, because it's hard to really quantify or express the amount of bandwidth and work it is to put on a conference.
And you have 2 others going on this year.
Correct. But those are much smaller, and they still take, the crazy thing I've learned is that even though it's smaller, it still takes all my time every day.
So let's talk about those 2 conferences. You have TLU Beach in Huntington Beach, May 17th?
May 17th through 21.
So then you have TLU New York City,
Yes.
September
Yes.
21st through the 23rd?
Yes.
I am super excited. I've been waiting for a New York City conference.
I'm kind of excited too, because there's a lot of the best trial lawyers are coming together, because a friend of mine, Ben Morelli, he's a pretty prominent lawyer out there, and his firm is just the most wonderful group of people. And I haven't seen them in the courtroom, but based upon the results they get and the people they are, I think they're extremely talented group of people. But he's also friends with some, like what I call gangster trial lawyers that will be coming to the event too. And so I'm kind of excited about it, because I don't have that much of a following on the East Coast. A little bit, and there's so many people that live there, but they're kind of like insulated. Every time I talk to people about going to the East Coast, they're like, oh, those people, like they think they know everything. I'm like, well, maybe they do, but maybe they just, or maybe they're open to learning stuff too. We won't know. I mean, once I do a program, then I have a better assessment of the people there.
So for all of our listeners, Dan is giving a $200 discount for TLU Beach. Is it also for TLU NYC or no?
Yes, for
Okay.
TLU Beach and TLU NYC.
So the code will be LawRank200, and you guys will get $200 off. We'll put it in the show notes. Now, you're an amazing networker. Talk to us about how that's helped you grow, because you really are a really, really, really good networker.
Well, I appreciate that, but I work on it. And I work on it by being present and going to conferences, and I go to a lot of conferences, and it helps a lot when you already have a relationship with a lot of people, because when you go into a conference and let's say 20% of the people, well, the people that know them, if the people that you run into have a warm feeling towards you, well, the people that know them, then they're going to have a warm feeling towards you. And then if you spend time, spending time talking with those people, well, now you have a relationship, and now they're part of your network. So that's a lot of it. But most everybody that registers for my conferences, I call them up, and I spend 15 to 45 minutes on the phone with them, telling them about the event, how it's going to benefit them, learning about what they want to get out of it, and just getting to know them as a person. And that helps a lot too, because when they come to my events, now they feel a lot more comfortable, and they feel like they know more people. And so I try to do everything I can at our events to help people build their communities, because we're social animals and life is lonely, and being a trial lawyer is lonely. And so when we go to events, I think it's great if we can not just learn, not just have fun, but if we can make a whole bunch of new friends, and not just exchange business cards, but be at the point where at least we're exchanging cell phone numbers, having lunch, stuff like that, and having a relationship, so that when you see that person the next time, it's like you see them, like your face lights up. Hey, Maria, how's it going? I can't believe it's been so long.
Your face does not light up when you see me.
But you understand the point I was making.
Yes, I'm
you're the
kidding.
exception.
I'm teasing you.
I
Yes.
know you are. And so
It's funny because you always say to me, how cool are our lives that we get to go to conferences and see all our friends. So I know you truly believe this because you say this to me offline.
right. I mean, it's true. I just people are like, oh, you got to go to these conferences. It must be such a drain to be on the road. I'm like, are you kidding me? To go from really one party to the next where all your friends are and you haven't seen them in a while? In different cities and it just kind of, and to get to learn some new cool stuff. I mean, what more could you ask for? And you get paid to do it, basically. I mean, what more could you ask for?
Yeah. Now, you also host these connection workshops in Vegas at your apartment or condo or whatever. I've attended one, basically got kicked out for laughing. Not really kicked out, but I kicked myself out because I kept laughing. But I was really, really impressed because you are like a little actor up there. And like you turn into, when I first heard that Dan was teaching a connections workshop, I laughed for like 5 minutes straight because I just could not imagine it. So, but it was really neat actually watching you do it because it like you transform into like a different person, in my opinion. Like you're really in the moment and you're really like connecting as you're teaching this thing and you're in like character. Can you tell us a little bit about these workshops?
Sure. These workshops kind of grew out of another workshop I used to teach called Trojan Horse Method. And I taught those workshops, over 100 of them, for the 6 years prior to the pandemic. And my whole goal was I was trying to figure out how do, the great trial lawyers, how do they get these big verdicts? Why does one lawyer get $10 million on the same set of facts in the same location where another lawyer might get $1 million? And so what's the difference between these lawyers? And it took the pandemic for me to really start to figure it out because I got an opportunity to sit and study film and get to talk to and interview all these lawyers. The Panishes, the Rowleys, the Mitnicks, the Freeds, the people that I think are great lawyers that get great results. How do they do it? And what it came down to is that they all have very different personalities, different demeanors, different skill sets, but they all really focused on their connection with the jury. And Claggett, for example, all of them just focus on the connection with the jury, more so than the facts and the evidence. They would cut witnesses, they would cut testimony short. And I said, why did you do that? I just felt the jury, I just felt they didn't need it. I just felt, I was reading them, they didn't need it. And I was like, it's all about the connection. And then as I thought about it and just trained, it's like, what is connection? How do we get connected to somebody? And if you think about it, like what breaks connection? Well, if you and I are sitting here having a conversation and my phone vibrates and I look down at it, well, that breaks connection because now I just made you feel insignificant. And that whatever, text message or whatever email came through was more important than me listening to you because nobody can multitask.
So do you think as just in general, as humans, we are less connected now because of our cell phones? Ironically, because couldn't you argue that the phone allows us to connect with people virtually? I
don't really think about stuff like that. I only think about in my own interactions, to not disrespect somebody if I'm talking to them and, look at the phone unless I say, excuse me, sorry, I just have to, other meeting, somebody's checking it real quick. Would that be okay? Yes, great. Now I'm back, right? I don't really think that, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but that's not really part of my processing. My processing is, really building that to be able to teach people how to get that connection in the courtroom setting, in front of a group, standing up, and especially when they know you want something from them. And those same skills of connection that we learn are the same skills that we use in everyday life with the people around us. And so once people start learning, what is appropriate eye contact, what is, to control the muscles of their face so they can smile authentically or look concerned, depending on however they want their juror to feel. Because it doesn't matter how you, the trial lawyer, feels. Who cares? It's like being a leader. As a leader, it doesn't matter how you feel. You don't just get to, if you're angry, just get angry at people because they won't follow you, they'll leave you. It's the same thing as a trial lawyer. And we know that mirror neurons, like you smile at somebody, it's much more likely to smile back at you than give you a frown or to be disinterested.
I'm trying not to smile when you smile.
Right, but it's a natural reaction because of mirror neurons. And when we learn to use our hands appropriately and use it as a connecting device in between, with one person. Because so many trial lawyers I see when they're up there presenting, even great ones, are like this the whole time. their hands are shaking up and down like this. And I look at that, I'm just like, it doesn't make any sense, because they're trying to connect in one juror's eyes, hopefully, because you can connect with one person at a time, right? But they have these two things moving in their lower peripherals. And if they weren't talking, it looks like they're angry, like, Maria, how could you be doing this? Instead of if you're just talking to one person, I think it's a lot more effective to just have the one hand and keep your hand a couple inches below your chin. And if you eventually train yourself and learn to move it with the rhythm of your voice, well, now it becomes a real accessory to connection, because it's between you and your listener. And, it's visually, it's not like up in front of your face where it's just, bracking, but it's here. So it's a little motion attractor for not just the listener, but the people around you too. And learning how to slow down, because most people speed up under pressure. But training yourself to slow down, to speak a little slower, to pause whenever you want to kind of maybe emphasize a point, but also to speak slower and to pause, because, most lawyers are pretty smart. And I found that the smarter people are, the more rapidly they speak, because they're processing everything they're saying as they're saying it. So it doesn't seem like, but for the people who aren't as smart as they are, and everybody has different levels of intellect and education, well, all those people that aren't as smart as that fast-talking lawyer, they miss so much. And then they're forced to process all this. Every word that's used has to be processed and given meaning to. And when people speak too rapidly, they don't allow the listener's mind to process and absorb, and then pretty soon you tire them out, and I think they stop listening.
So you have lawyers come, it's a group of 8 to 12?
8 to 10.
8 to 10.
But we break into groups of 4 or 5, and then we have preset scripts for voir dire.
And you record, right?
And we record every presentation, and we just do it in small chunks, no more than a minute, because we have to take the time to play it back and correct the hand movements, correct the facial expressions, correct the word choice, correct the eye contact, and other things. Correct these things, and then show and demonstrate how it's supposed to be done, then have them do it again.
Now, what I found I found it really funny, but that's besides the point, really refreshing, was that you really do give the lawyers that come to your connection course tough love. You're not sugarcoating it. You're like, hey, you want to get better, I'm going to make you better. And that's what's funny about it, because Dan cares so much that he actually gets annoyed. He's like, because they're not doing what he's asking over and over. But it's a loving way, because he wants them, he knows that they can do it. Am I making sense? Do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean. And I work on being patient. And, just so you know, but there's 6 weeks of preparation via Zoom. And
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
6 weeks?
Oh, yeah. We have a meeting every once a week for about an hour and a half. Sometimes I have to have 2 meetings a week, because I'm coaching them on the video so that they're learning the hand gestures.
Oh, I thought it was here's the script, go do it. And I'm like...
Oh, no. And I emphasize to them that they must practice. They must have this stuff memorized so that none of their bandwidth is used up trying to remember what to say. It can all be focused on the presentation and the connection. And and I tell them also, I said, this is like a group work and we're all mutually reliant upon each other, like we're Marines. Because if one person is not prepared, then
you're slowing everyone down.
And they're wasting everybody's time, and it's not fair, because people took time out of their lives. They traveled here, they paid the tuition, and now they're not getting the value because one person was selfish. And they could say, oh, I was busy. Oh, I had a trial. Oh, I had this or that. I said, I understand.
Everyone's
but
busy.
We're all busy.
Yeah.
And what I tell them to do, I say, if you're not prepared, I give them the choice. I said, I think you should consider just sitting and being a juror and watching the practice, and come back in a month. And I'm not going to charge you again, but I want you to get transformed. I want you to get these skills. Because if people come to my workshop and they don't get significantly better, then it's a failure. And whether I failed them or they failed themselves, the failure is still in it. And that's not good for anybody. It's not good for them. It's not good for me. And it's not good for their clients. And it's more important that they learn and they get better, because our responsibilities as trial lawyers are huge. I mean, people's lives are in our hands. And, we'd think that the pressure being civil was a little bit less than being a criminal defense lawyer. If you truly believe somebody's innocent and they're charged with murder or rape and they're looking at the rest of their life in prison for something they didn't do, and you're the only thing between them and a life of hell. And not just them, though. Their whole family goes to prison with them, and they all live in hell. And that's just the worst pressure. And I know it's pressure when people have several $100,000 of their money on the line, and an injured person who, may not get proper medical care, may end up homeless if that lawyer fails. But it's still slightly different when you have, 3 or 4 deputies sitting in the audience who are waiting as the juror comes out for the foreman to rise and read the verdict. There's that is the pressure of that. I mean, that's why I really don't do criminal defense anymore, because.
Were you trying murder cases?
Occasionally. Actually, I only did one.
How did
and it was pro bono. It was like a 15-minute acquittal. But it the reality is that, so that murder case was 2 months long. And I did it pro bono, and I had to spend like $20,000 out of my pocket hiring experts, paying everybody to work for me.
Why did you do it? To learn?
Well, I learned a lot, but I did it because I believed the man was innocent, and that I was the only thing that could stop him. Maybe a public defender could have done the same job, but that wasn't my thinking. My thinking was somehow, the universe or God or whatever you want to believe brought that person to my door. So I'm just thinking okay, well, our paths cross is for a reason. And this is, once I hear a story and I believe somebody's innocent, it's kind of hard not to help, I kind of look at if you were on the side of, if you were on a cruise ship. It's a part of my closing argument in that case too, because, I said to the folks in the closing, I was like, people say, how can you represent somebody like this, charged with murder, hit a gun? And I said, it's kind of like being, if you're out on a cruise ship, let's say you with your significant other and you're out there and you're out by the railing and, kind of watching, just having a moment of love. And then you hear this, and you look down and you see that, a person's fallen over, that they're overboard. And I said, in that moment, do you think to yourself, I wonder if that's a man or a woman? I wonder if they're black or white. I wonder how old they are. Or do you, in that moment, you have a choice to make, right? It's either you act and you lower the lifeboat down and you save that person. Maybe you have to sit with them for a while too. Maybe you have to wait a week for another boat to come by. Or you just turn your head and pretend like you didn't see it. And nobody's going to know the difference except you. So that's what it was like being a criminal defense lawyer and taking those kinds of cases. But it takes so much out of you and takes so much of your time. You can't really make a living. And so it's and that's why it's, people that really are serious about criminal defense typically don't have a lot of money, because the people we represent don't have a lot of money. And you can't get paid from somebody that doesn't have anything. And so, that was a long time ago. And, and it was exhausting.
It sounds really difficult. I think a lot of people don't get to see this side of you, though, because I know you are a person that cares. I know that about you, but I think I know you pretty well at this point.
Oh,
but
time does it.
Yep. A lot of people that maybe meet you at a conference and spend 5-10 minutes with you, they don't see this side. Why do you think that is?
Well, probably because I don't tell stories that get me worked up too often. And
but even
well, I don't know if people, I think anybody that has watched Trial Lawyers University, been to one of our events, I think they're pretty certain that I give a damn.
Oh no, you have a lot of really good friends that love you.
Right, but I'm saying about the event, about the vendors who come, to make sure that that they're put in a position to create relationships with lawyers who need their services, to give them time to create that relationship of trust. For the lawyers who come and to learn that I'm aware that they're there because they want to get better, but not just learn, but but they want to make new friends. They want to have fun, and I have the responsibility to create that place, to create that environment where these things can happen for them. Because I've been all those people.
TLU is an amazing event. You know that I go to every single event. And as a vendor, it's been our best event. And I can say that confidently because I have the data. So you absolutely care so much about the event. But one thing I'm never going to forget, because I was impressed that you handled it this way, that you were like, oh, at this, I was like, are you super stressed like during the event? And you're like, nope, like what's going to happen or is going to happen. What happened already. Like I've spent so many months prepping. I'm just going to enjoy it at this point. And I thought, look at Dan. Good for him.
That's what TLU Beach will be like. We're working our butt off to make it great, and and bring people there and create the best environment. And this is going to be, I tell everybody, like, this is going to be our best conference ever. And sometimes, like, we say that about every conference. I'm like, and it's true, because I learned from the last one and I made adjustments from the last one to make this one better.
So what can people expect from TLU Beach?
People can expect to be in one of the nicest hotels they've ever been in, the Pasea. It's a small boutique hotel. It's only about 220 rooms.
So are you capping out how many attendees max?
Well, the hotel has tons of space. I mean, the
exhibit,
the conference rooms are large, so it's not really a cap on it. I expect it'll be a smaller conference. I expect around 350 or 400 people. But we have the whole hotel. I contracted out the entire hotel. So everybody in the hotel will be at our conference, which is really great because it makes it so much easier to make friends and to network when you see people you know everywhere, and nobody's going to get lost. And I'd be very, you know what I mean? Because I've been to conferences that people not sure where they're going.
Yeah.
Speakers don't know where their rooms are at. Attendees are and they get frustrated because they're supposed to be somewhere. And so that won't be happening at TLU, because one thing we do too is like a month ahead of time, I do an orientation for everybody and let them know, via Zoom, invite everybody. Anybody that doesn't show up, I send them the video. But that way they can know where everything's at. And, I'm very conscientious about signage and having people around that know where everything's at so that it flows well. And, so they can expect that. As far as learning, though, they can expect to learn more than they've ever imagined, because we have 4 tracks, and Rex Paris's firm, who I think, he's kind of like my mentor because I met him back in 2003, and he actually got me into the Trial Lawyers College. It might have been 2002, because I'd been rejected from the Trial Lawyers College a few times, and he got me into the Trial Lawyers College because I met him at a regional event, and we had a relationship from there. Obviously, we've kind of separated ways over the years at times, but during the pandemic, he was the first major trial lawyer to come on, and he brought Brian Panish with him. That obviously gave me credibility, which Sean Claggett was on before him, but Sean Claggett was not the major force in trial world that back then as he is today. And so that was really great. But so the Paris firm have their own track. Sean has his track because he's got 6 hours he's going to do with Dorothy Clay Sims on crushing defense experts. He's doing 6 hours on big data with his buddy John Campbell, who's a trial lawyer and a data scientist, and how they do this big data research, how they interpret it, how they apply it to trial preparation, and how they apply it to mediation and settlement. This data, and then he's doing one day with Jordan Logan, who's his partner who he tries the cases with, on a couple recent verdicts they got. One was a auto versus bicycle. It was like a $14 million verdict. And then a med-mal trial where a woman suffered from dehydration. I'm not sure exactly what it's called, but they got a $47 million verdict on that one. So kind of break it down from each step of trial and how from the work days that they put in. Because this firm here, Claggett and Sykes, these people prepare. And everybody that goes to trial here, they really prepare very differently and more methodically than most firms that I've seen. I've never seen anybody use their systems here. And I think they're really great systems. And that was kind of part of the pandemic. I got to identify a few firms where it was like they had champions. Like they had a whole bench full of champions. They didn't just have, one star. It wasn't just like Michael Jordan. It's like, Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman. They just had this system of training and preparing that was superior. And, so those folks I give them more time on the stage because they have more to share because they've thought about it deeper. But there's also on the other tracks, Brian Panish, Rahul Ravapudi, Sonia Chopra, Joe Freed, and Satch Oliver are doing 6 hours. And 3 of the hours are on advanced negotiation, where they're going to be meeting with folks beforehand via Zoom and getting their information and getting maybe a half a dozen to a dozen actual cases. So none of it's going to be recorded, of course, because these are live cases, and work through with the participants how they would go about positioning the negotiation to maximize the recovery. Because, let's be honest, 98% of the cases settle. So the better your negotiating skills, the better you are going to be. The more well-off you're going to be, the better off your clients are going to be.
Absolutely.
So those are the tracks. But then there are 7 workshop / bootcamp tracks. And that I'm even more excited about.
Why are you so excited about the boot camps?
Well, I'm so excited about the boot camps because when you have a person that's kind of an expert in an area, in order for them to really teach, they need more time. And as a teacher, what you want is you want students who are committed to learning. And so these boot camps, especially the ones that are 2 days long, like David D. Robertus, who is pretty much recognized as the premier employment lawyer on the West Coast, maybe in the country. He's doing a 2-day boot camp masterclass on preparing and trying employment cases for just 20 people. So those 20 people have to make a commitment to be in David's class for the full 2 days. And David's made a commitment to download to them to teach them his best of being a plaintiff's employment lawyer. And they're going to meet 3 times before the program via Zoom so that he can start to share with them what he's going to teach. They can share with David what they want to learn. And these folks can start to get to know each other and get comfortable.
And how many spots are left out of that 20?
I think like 7.
Oh, wow. So if you're interested, sign up.
Well, but those people are going to work together, and they're going to have like a mastermind by the time they're done. Right. Because they're going to be together for those 2 days. That's a lot. How often do you spend 2 days with one person? Especially, and
I feel like I spent 2 days with you all the time.
Well, but when you focus really hard on something, and intellect, and people are smart, they have epiphanies, they have breakthroughs. And so David's doing that in the employment area. Dale Gallipo is doing that in the civil rights area. Our friend Daryl Isaacs and Andrew Finkelstein are doing a 2-day masterclass boot camp on building your $1 billion empire.
That's amazing.
Because they both built $1 billion firms and sometimes multi-billion dollar firms. And they really have a desire to teach and to share.
Oh, Daryl's, he's amazing.
Right. And so and because of that, the folks, because you can't be an effective trial lawyer if you're not making money, because everything we do takes money. Experts, graphics, people, assistants, other lawyers. Everybody's got to get paid. And if you're not running a good business, you don't have the money. But that I'm really excited about. And that one, they just had their first Zoom meetup yesterday, and I sat in on it for about the first half hour, and it was just so exciting because these people are just, when you hit these, I guess, these challenges in business, and you don't have people that will, to help you break through. Well, these people, again, it's gonna be like this mastermind of folks that are, and some of the folks in it aren't even lawyers. They're just the business. They're just the operations person at the firm, but they're there to learn how to run the firms better. And so those are some examples of, and I'm teaching 2 2-day workshop boot camps on my connection. So we're doing one Wednesday and Thursday, so folks are coming in early, so that way they get to do my boot camp for 2 days and then participate in the rest of the conference for the other 2 days, whether the rest of the conference is, sitting in the lectures or doing other workshops or other boot camps. And Philip Miller, who's like the premier deposition guy, he's doing a 2-day boot camp on advanced depositions. So that's why I'm excited about doing these these master classes and the effect it's going to have on the people. I don't know, because as an entrepreneur, as you have these visions, you have to imagine the world before it exists, and then you have to work to make that world exist or create that world and see if people are interested in buying it.
Right. Well, I'm super excited for TLU Beach.
Me too.
I can't wait. I am sure it'll be super, super successful. and we'll get to talk about it afterwards.
We'll do a recap.
Yeah,
Say,
we'll
what
do a
was that
recap
like?
for anyone that missed it.
All right, sounds great. Thanks, Maria. Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Thank you. Dan, what was your favorite part about today's episode?
I guess maybe just reminiscing about the journey to where I got to today.
I know you even got a little emotional there for me.
Yeah, that's why I can't be the criminal defense lawyer. It took too much out of me.
It was good. We also talked about what is coming up, like what's actually going to happen at TLU Beach, what we can expect from your conference. And
Expect to have the greatest time of your life and learn more than you ever imagined and make a whole bunch of new friends.
And we talked about his connection courses, although I can't sit through them because I just laugh hysterically like a 5-year-old child.
Well, we're waiting for you to start studying the materials and getting up and presenting.
Oh my goodness, that makes me nervous. Thank you so much to Dan Ambrose from Trial Lawyers University for everything he shared with us today. If you found this story valuable, please share it with someone you want to see succeed and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Catch us next week on Tip the Scales with me, Maria Monroy, president of Lawring. Hear how the best in the business broke out of limiting beliefs, overcame adversity, and built a thriving, purpose-driven business in the process.